What, if anything, was consciously going through your mind as you were running toward the car?
My whole purpose was to move forward, get onto the back of the car, to to build that barricade or protective cover up there for both President and Mrs. Kennedy. It's what we call in the Secret Service cover and evacuate. But I didn't get there in time to cover. The bullet outran me, and it hit President Kennedy in the head.
Lisa, I hope you approve of my mug. I went out of my way to find this one.
Oh, good. You don't use it every day?
Well, you know what? Only for special occasions. It was my everyday mug for a while, and then I realized, you know what? I can't maintain that same level of constant thrill, and so now I intersperse it, right? So I don't drink out of my travels with Mrs. Kennedy mug every day. I'm sorry. Clint,
We'll
how
have
are
to
you,
get
sir?
a new one. Clint, how are you, sir?
I'm awake.
Well, you know what? In the spirit of
Not being.
no kidding, man. Look, I mean that's one of the great lessons in life. I don't know if you've experienced it yourself, but for me, the business of managing expectations is somewhere near the very top of the list, right? So, if the bar is awake, that's terrific. We can only go uphill.
That's right.
That's true.
Awake and upright. That's good.
Yeah, standing above the ground.
Fogging a mirror, as my grandfather used to say.
Good indication you're still there. Yes.
As opposed to, we might want to talk about the surprise that we had for Clint and what his reaction was. It's kind of interesting.
Did he clutch his pearls? Did he? Yeah, you know what? Let's start there, Lisa, because of the many regrets that I know I'm going to have one day when I look back at my misspent life and career. It's not being present for that. I was in Italy at the time, and apparently I missed quite the shindig.
Well, it really was, and I had no idea what was going on.
Explain what happened.
Well, I had been told that two friends of ours from Washington, D.C., Rocky Delmonico and his girl, and his wife, I guess she's his wife, Emily. Eileen, I'm sorry, were coming, and they were bringing with them a gentleman from Italy who was a friend of ours and who works for
Dallara.
Dallara. They make all the chassis for race class cars, number one type
Indy
car,
500.
Indy 500 cars, the cars in Monaco and places. And so they came, and she had me get all gussied up for them. We were going to go to dinner, and they insisted I go out on the deck and sit there by the table and talk to them while she was doing something else. And I noticed when she came downstairs that she was dressed rather like she was going to go someplace special. And I mentioned it to her. She had some answer, like she had a new gown she just wanted to try and something. I also noticed that this was on a Wednesday. The gardeners usually came on Friday, but that day they came Wednesday morning. So I asked her about that, and she had some talking mammy story to tell me about that. So I finally went out at the table and sat there talking to these three people, and I was talking and turned to the right, and standing in the doorway leading out to the grassy area of our yard, I saw this first guy I saw was a guy that I had come into the Secret Service with on the same day in 1958, Ron Pontius from Chicago. I thought, Ron's pretty sick. Did I just die and I'm in heaven? And Ron's there? And he took a step forward, and right behind him was Jerry Blaine from Grand Junction, Colorado. He and I were together on the detail. gee, all these guys died at the same time. I mean, and there came Tommy Wells from Florida and
Ken
Ken
Gianoulis,
Gianoulis from Chicago, and
Rad Jones,
Brad Jones
from
from
Michigan.
Michigan. I mean, just I kept on coming. It turns out she had arranged for a surprise party for me here,
He didn't die.
and all these guys had flown in from all over the country. Even one of the widows had flown in. Her son helped her get here by accompanying her from Virginia Beach, Virginia. I mean, it was amazing. These guys were just fantastic guys. One of them was a former director of the Secret Service, Joe Clancy from Philadelphia. He and his wife were here. And then she had arranged all this stuff. I had no knowledge whatsoever that she was doing this. She arranged to have them go out on a boat. They came in on a Wednesday. They went out on a boat, enjoyed themselves. I couldn't believe this all happened, but it did. It was the most wonderful surprise one can imagine.
Clint, what
was
kind
very
of
lucky.
But I
Secret
never
Service
thought his
agent are you? How do you not figure this out? Was there no advance work? Was there no, were there no clues? How
obviously
can a man
very-
of your experience be so duped?
I have to admit, I'm a really dumbass. Apparently.
No, you're out of practice. You're out of practice.
That must be it.
And I guess I'm a good actress.
Oh,
She
you're
made no indication at all prior to the time that I was made aware that these other three people were coming. There was no indication of anything other than that. And
What
she
did it
had
take,
to learn
Lisa?
a lot of people, and they
What did
really
it
all
take
kept
to
their
arrange
mouths
this?
shut.
Right.
Say that
I
again,
mean,
Mike?
that's it. What did it take to arrange this? How long did it take? And I mean, it's pretty remarkable. You just went down a list of people who are many are in their ninth decade from all over the
In their
country.
80s.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we normally, every September, we would attend the annual Secret Service Agents Conference of former Secret Service agents. And we always looked forward to going to that. And the last one we went to was 2019. Then there was COVID, and then they had one this past year, but since Clint can't travel anymore, we realized we're not going to get to go to those anymore. So I got the idea, well, why don't we bring part of the conference to us, invite the people that are really special to us, and see if they'll come. Well, I knew that Clint would never go for this. He would shut me down, right?
Yeah, that's true.
He never would have done this. So I sent out an email to all these people and I said, I have this idea. Why don't we all get together and come to, our beautiful little town here outside of San Francisco, and how many people can come? Well, Ken Gianoulis canceled his trip to Italy to come.
Unlike Mike.
He said, unlike Mike, but he said he wouldn't miss it. I think it's such a tribute to Clint that all these people made that effort to come to see him. And everybody kept it quiet. It was so amazing. And it was just a beautiful time. Everybody, once they all got together, all these guys, it's just like no time has gone by, and they start telling stories. It was fantastic.
Yeah, some of the photographs are tremendous taken that day of this get-together. I'll never get over it.
But I never thought he would have the reaction that he thought he had died
I thought
and gone to heaven.
I really thought, I must be dead.
Well, Lisa, I mean, he's 91 years old. I mean, really, a surprise of that.
She's taking chances at, boy.
She really rolled the dice on that one, brother.
I know.
What a way to go.
Well, congratulations on a great event and on not dying and everything else. It really must be extraordinary. I mean, I've never been, with respect, as old as you, but to look back, through the mists of time, through the decades, with friends, dear friends who were there at, really this turning point in history. Does it feel Does it feel like a very long time ago, or does it feel like yesterday to you?
It depends upon the situation. Some things feel like they were 65, 70 years ago, like my high school graduation or my college graduation or my basic training in the Army. I guess those things weren't the top of my list. But some things seem like it was just last week. And it's 50 years since that event happened. So it varies depending upon the situation.
Is it strange for you, Lisa, to see how time can get compressed by events? I mean, as a writer, you've spent a lot of time in the past, and it seems like today, a lot of people, right? I mean, it's been, this book originally came out 10 years ago on the 50th
Yes.
anniversary. Now it's been 60 years. You've republished 5 Days in November with some new materials in it that are kind of extraordinary. But I just wonder, is it getting more and more surreal as you look around and see the interest in this event? It seems to be growing as time goes on.
It does, actually. You're right. I mean, so this book, 5 Days in November, is all about those 5 days around the assassination of President Kennedy, of which Clint, of course, was, right there in the middle of all of it. And the idea for this was to show it in photographs and Clint's first-person account as he's going through it. Present tense, so you're witnessing things as he witnesses it, not knowing what's ahead. And it's really rather timeless, I think. And the idea now at the 60th anniversary was, since the book is written in the present tense, for Clint now to look back 60 years and give his perspective on why there is this fascination still with all of this, why there are still questions and controversies and conspiracies, and to give, again, his first person unmatched account.
And to me, I mean, that's it. Chuck, I want you to jump in real quick, because we were talking earlier, and I rarely ask for Chuck's opinion because no one really cares, and it's not relevant by and large. But he loves
the
this
nicest
book
thing you've
so
ever
much.
said to me. It's true. I do.
Well, you had some really good points about it, because this is, like, I remember 10 years ago when this came out, the market was flooded with all kinds of recollections and reminiscences, and yours stuck out for obvious reasons. But now, for whatever reason, it really is standing alone. And Chuck, you had some interesting thoughts as to why.
Well, I listened to the book on tape, which unfortunately I didn't see the photos that are in the book, and I will hope to get a copy of the full book so I can see those. But in just listening,
You will get
to
a copy.
Well, thank you. In just listening to it,
$29.99.
it's first person, it's present tense. So I'm just experiencing everything with Clint from those 5 days. It was like a movie to me, and I got incredibly emotional multiple times in the book. Just the tragedy of it all. You set up so beautifully the people's reactions to the Kennedys every place in Texas that they were. This was a beloved couple. This was a beloved president, and the I think what Mike is referring to, the one thing that got to me is that in the end, the epilogue where you talk about the conspiracy theories and why you believe that it was just one man who did this, and you make a brilliant point by using the photographs to say where the bystanders were looking because they had heard the gunshots, and that's a huge indication of what exactly happened. And I just thought it was brilliantly done.
Excellent.
Yeah, in that particular photo, it's just as the first shot has gone off, and you can see in the background the people that are standing alongside the presidential vehicle. They've come there to see the president and the first lady, and they're literally in front of them, and the people are turned away. They're turned back towards where they heard the sound.
Toward the
So-
book depository building.
Towards the Texas School Book Depository.
Sixth floor window, Texas School Book Depository, yes, sir.
Nobody's
Lisa, do you
turned
mind
around
if
to
I
look
just-
at the grassy
pardon?
knoll.
No, nobody that I saw.
All right, look, I want to get into this. I just want to read something real quick, all right, because this
Yes,
this struck me. It's just a real short paragraph. In fact, it's the beginning of the afterword. On November 22nd, 1963, my life changed forever because of the history-altering crime committed in my presence in Dallas, Texas. Before that day, I was just Clint Hill, but in the 60 years since, I have been known as the man who climbed onto the back of the presidential car when JFK was assassinated. It's not a label I carry out of pride. It's the label I have learned to accept. When we originally wrote this book, 50 years after the assassination, my hope was that sharing these indelible memories from my unmatched perspective would provide not only current readers, but future generations as well, with an authentic version of what actually happened that fateful day. And here's the sentence that's important to me. It concerns me deeply that now, 60 years after the tragedy, numerous polls show that a majority of American citizens still believe that a conspiracy was involved in JFK's death, despite the lack of conclusive evidence. This belief is based on countless theories that continue to proliferate across the internet, and I fear that once all of us who were witnesses to history are gone, the truth will be buried along with us. That,
And
to
there are
me,
only two.
that's it.
There
Yeah.
are only two people left from that motorcade, that either the president's car or the follow-up car, that are still alive. I'm one of them.
So, why, Lisa, is it so important as a journalist to make sure that one of the surviving witnesses has his exact recollections perfectly preserved, as this book does?
Well, I think, Clint, as you know, was reluctant to talk about any of this for so many years. And then once he started talking and going out and speaking about this, he realized there was tremendous interest, and his memories are important to history. And the great thing about Clint, as you know and have witnessed, is his memory is extraordinary. And he remembers details. And if you look at the photographs and he'll tell you a story, it's exactly as it is in the photograph. So it was just important to write this down for history so that it's everlasting. Because like you said, he's the last one, and 40 years from now, what are people going to know or see or think? They might see what's on the internet, and it might be, Oliver Stone's movie. People believe that. That was really a disservice to the truth.
What does it feel like, Clint, to be sitting at home, flicking around the TV, you come across the Oliver Stone movie or any number of other versions of the way somebody else heard it, right? To be sitting there and watching something that you know for a fact to be just completely untrue.
It really bothers me to know that kind of stuff is, in fact, out there, and it is. It's not just that movies by Oliver Stone. There's, like you said, there's other stuff. But then he comes out with more stuff besides the movie. He had another thing out this year, and he called on certain technical people that he thought were really important to the issue, and turns out they didn't know a damn thing. It was really sick. I actually got sick to my stomach listening to him.
He did. We had to turn it off. He was so repulsed by it. He really felt physically sick that this was on television, that people were saying these things as if they were fact. And of course, people will believe them.
it just seems like we're living in a time, and I'd love your thoughts on this too, Clint. I mean, there's always the fog of war. There's always he said, she said. There's always conflicting accounts. But it just feels like we're living in a time, in a very general way, where we're surrounded by experts who can't seem to agree on a set of facts. And I wonder, do you worry that the truth in so many different areas is being missed by so many people?
Oh, it is. When a government institution like the Warren Commission, which was set up by LBJ and chaired by the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, when they make errors in perception and judgment in their final conclusions, and they're trying to sell that to the American public, that's what creates these problems. There's some things that they said and did that, like the magic bullet theory, that's one thing. It just is a maze to me that anybody was dumb enough to accept it. But that created conspiracies all up and down the line. And it's just sick and sad.
So, at what point, Lisa, was the magic bullet in your research dismissed as nonsense? Or has it ever been? Does it still somehow persist?
No, because Clint has the answer. I mean, as to what happened, and he was there and he witnessed it. So there was no magic bullet. Clint, tell them what happened.
What happened was there were 3 shots, all fired from the 6th floor window of the Texas School Book Depository. 1 rifle, 3 shots. Shot number 1 hit President Kennedy in the upper back, below the neck, just to the right of the spinal cord, and came out through the throat. Shot number 2 hit Governor John Connally and caused him serious damage. It was so powerful it went through various parts of his body and really damaged his back, his arm, his thigh. It really made a mess. They were able to take care of him, though, at the hospital once we got him there. And then shot number 3, it hit President Kennedy in the head. At the time, the president had fallen to his left toward Mrs. Kennedy, who was seated on his left. Their faces were almost touching. His head was slightly down like this. That bullet entered back here, but erupted right up in here, right above the ear, and blew a portion of the skull out. It was still attached, part of the skull was still attached to the hairline, to the skin with the hair. It had just kind of flipped forward. But a great bunch of material came right out of there: blood, bone material, brain material. And that was a fatal shot. Nobody could survive that. We got him to the hospital as quickly as we could. I screamed at the driver to get us to the hospital. The supervisor in the president's car was talking to the lead car, which is right in front of the president's car, and being driven by the chief of police of Dallas, telling them that we'd been hit, get us to a hospital, and they were leading us to a hospital. Luckily, we're just getting on a freeway. We had free access, and we got him to the hospital within a few minutes. But nothing could have been done for him anyway. He was dead.
And does it strike you, I mean, when you look back at it, it's sort of an odd combination of things to know for sure. The first thing you know for sure is that he's dead, and it doesn't matter when he gets to the hospital. He's going to be dead when he arrives. The second thing is you have to get him to the hospital as quickly as humanly possible. those two things seem odd, right, to exist at the same time, but obviously
Well,
they did.
but we also had a wounded person in the car,
Yeah.
John Conley, and we had to get him to a hospital, and we had to get that car containing those occupants to the nearest hospital as fast as possible, and that's what we
But
did.
but this is really interesting on the back cover of this book. I guess that's from the Zapruder film, and there's a frozen shot of you running after the car. Halfway into it, Jackie is crawling toward you. Her husband is dead, and in the caption below it, it says, "If you trip or stumble or fall or fail to get into this accelerating car, you're going to be run over by the car behind you. There's no doubt. This is you're on a locomotive. So that, I mean, the stakes could. I mean, things could have. It's hard to imagine how things could have been worse. But having a Secret Service agent run over as he tried to get into the car would have certainly been a hell of a thing.
Well, and Mrs. Kennedy, if Clint hadn't gotten there, she could have been thrown off the car, and she would have been
come
run
off
over.
the back of the car. She could not have
She would have
stayed up
been run
there.
over.
She'd have come off the back of the car. They'd have run over her too.
Oh
So,
my God! Can you imagine?
It was just, I was lucky that I was as quick as I was, and that I was able to get my foot up on the back bumper. There's a place there for agents to stand. It's about maybe a foot square, and I got my foot up there. But then that was the same time that the car accelerated slightly, and my foot slipped off, and I had to take about 2 more steps to get it back up there, and then throw myself forward toward Mrs. Kennedy, get a hold of her, put her back in the seat, and then crawl up on the top of the back seat and lay above both President and Mrs. Kennedy while the car was moving rapidly toward the hospital.
Didn't you have a couple of practice runs, kind of like in the book? You're on the follow car on the left side, the floorboard, or what do you call that thing? The running board. Is
Running
that right?
board.
Right. So you're on the left side of the running board, and when the crowds got thick, you would run up. You would jump off that car and run up to the president's car and get on the running board there, just in case things went haywire. That happened like 2 or 3 times ahead of time. Do you think that helped you to like gauge really the distance and how
It may
quickly you
have,
need to
and
go?
we had trained for that type of thing to happen, but in the heat of the moment, you never know how you're going to react or how well you're going to do. And jumping off a moving car onto a pavement that's not moving with you
Yeah.
is a little bit difficult.
And you probably weren't wearing tennis shoes either.
No, I wasn't. I was wearing my good old Florsheims, and I should make that company pay me. But
Yeah, you should. The way I heard it, brought to you by Florsheim. Agent number 9.
It's one of the things we heard. We practice, but this is in real time, so you can't not make it. If you miss, you're likely to
shot.
be killed.
One
Yeah,
shot.
I mean, really, the athleticism is incredible of what he accomplished. I just think about that. A car's moving, it's accelerating. You're jumping off, you're going after another moving car, you slip in the pavement, not many people could do that.
I didn't have a real clear shot either because I had a motorcycle. When I jumped off the car, there was a motorcycle police officer, Dallas, adjacent to that car, or to our car, the one I was on, just to the left just outside the left front wheel. And I had to get between him and the car I was on to get to the president's car. That was probably more scary to me than anything else.
The thing that I find so interesting about all of this, just speaking really broadly, is the way you can take a big moment and distill it into a relatively small period of time. This book does it over a period of days. right? 5 days in November.
Yes, 5 days.
But I've also read accounts of 6 seconds, right? The 6 seconds it took to get off 3 shots. And it's just
Yes.
interesting that as time goes by, sometimes the best way to try and understand a moment is to make it as small as possible. So I've asked you this before, Clint, and you've told me that it feels like yesterday, that you remember with perfect clarity that day. But what, if anything, was consciously going through your mind as you were running toward the car? Were you thinking or were you purely reacting?
Probably a combination, but my whole purpose was to move forward, get onto the back of the car, to build that barricade or protective cover up there for both President and Mrs. Kennedy. It's what we call in the Secret Service cover and evacuate. Cover and let the driver have the opportunity to get you out of the danger zone. And that's what was supposed to happen. But I didn't get there in time to cover. The bullet outran me, and it hit President Kennedy in the head.
As moments go, that's your point in the afterward. One day you're Clint Hill, and literally seconds later, you're that guy. And did you know it at that point, or
No.
when did you know that you had sort of stumbled, maybe even Forrest Gumped your way into our collective memory?
I don't know. One strange thing that really did happen was I was in my residence in Alexandria, Virginia, and doorbell rang. I went to the door. 2 men standing there. One was obviously a photographer, and the other was a reporter. They were from London, and they wanted to talk to me about the new film about me. And I said, I don't quite know what you're talking about. No film about me. I said, oh, well, it's just coming out. Clint Eastwood is the star in it. I said, well, if there's a film, I don't know a thing about it. And I went back in the house, and they left. I could see they're talking to each other and shaking their heads. What the hell's going on here? This guy won't admit that they have a movie about him. And it wasn't a movie about me. There was a movie about a supposed Secret Service agent that they had built a story around using some events.
But the character was based on you.
Well, eventually I found out that, yes, that was what they had based it on. I found that out from Eastwood, who admitted that to somebody in a letter or something, and they told me about it. I did meet Mr. Eastwood, and Lisa had her picture taken with him.
I bet she did.
But you know the movie In the Line of Fire, classic.
Sure.
Yeah.
Classic. He knew nothing about it. Nobody had approached him about it.
Nothing.
They made this movie
That-
using him. So yeah. So
That may be when it really struck me that, geez, you suppose people think I'm, something special? I don't think so. Because anywhere in my neighborhood, I can go anywhere I want to. Nobody ever mentioned anything about it to me. Whether it was a grocery store, drugstore, get my hair cut, nothing.
even when I first met him in 2009, he really had no idea his sort of not his importance in history, but how well known he was. And once we started going out and publicizing the first book that we were involved with together, the Kennedy Detail, that's when I remember him saying, gosh, all these people, they come up to me and they want to shake my hand. I really don't understand it. I mean, he really didn't have a clue.
I don't. I mean, yeah, I still don't feel like I'm an imposter. You know, find somebody who's worthy. Shake their hand.
Well, look, I mean, we can debate your worthiness. You're going to lose that argument. I mean, because everybody believes and sees in you something truly admirable. You know, people often ask themselves, I think, what would I do? What would I do if I were in that situation? How would I have responded if I was on that train when those terrorists, right, showed up? If I was on Flight 93, would I have been
Yeah.
among the men who rushed the cockpit, right? And most people, they don't really know. They like to think they would be. They like to imagine themselves at their best. And then they see you doing something that they hope they would do. And look, that fair or unfair, you get a lot of that projected onto you. And as time goes by, more and more. And now today, 60 years after the fact, it feels to me, Lisa, like the country is realizing that time is fleeting, and that this was one of those moments. I forget what Malcolm Gladwell calls it, but there are moments where everybody remembers where they were and what they were doing. Mm-hmm. And Clint was right smack in the middle of those moments. 9/11 is one such moment. Certainly Pearl Harbor, for a whole lot of people, you know, many of whom are gone, was a moment. This was that moment, you know. And so that's why, Clint, because people like Chuck's sister, who's about 9 years older than him, was sitting there cross-legged in front of the TV, I guess, watching it. And she's still around. And she's still looking for some weird way to close the loop. Millions of people are, and you're helping them do that, which is Clint Eastwood or not. That's pretty awesome, man.
Well, I hope I'm helping them in some way. My intent is to give them the information that I know to be true, honest, factual, and let it go from there. I have nothing to benefit me other than just I believe in the truth.
Which is precisely why this book is persuasive. My comment to Chuck earlier, especially when you go through the afterword, which is brand new, and I think, you know, with respect to everything else in the book, the most important part of it, it just, like, you don't sell past the sale. You address every conspiracy theory that's out there. You explain why it's wrong, why people believed it reasonably for a while, but then why it was debunked or should be debunked. Mm-hmm. And in the end, it's not a big argument. You're kind of shrugging your shoulders and saying, look, I was there, which is something almost nobody else can say.
And the way that it affected the world, that was one of the things, because, you know, Mike, I wasn't alive when this happened. But, you know, in doing all the research and talking with Clint and seeing everything that I've seen about it, the world stopped for 4 days. Nothing else mattered. People were around the world were in shock. You know, we have this dry cleaner here that we go to in our little village here, and we've gotten to know the people that run it. And the gentleman that runs it, I ran into him the other day, and he was asking about Clint, and he said he couldn't believe it's been 60 years, and he remembers when he was in South Korea, and the teacher stopped class and said, President Kennedy has been shot and killed. And in South Korea, the world stopped. The kids were sent home from school.
Wow.
I mean, that's amazing.
Truly incredible. It's truly incredible. And the fact that there is still so much controversy and so much, you know, disagreement around it. I mean, I wonder, it's been, 21, 22 years since 9/11. So 40 years from now, the vast majority of people in this country will have no recollection of that day. And look at the conspiracies swirling around that event just 20 years in. And imagine what's going to be out there in whatever the internet 2.0, 3.0, I mean, who knows with artificial intelligence and everything else. The truth is going to be in short supply. And that, to me, is why, our best hope of getting at it is through an eyewitness. And, there you are, Mr. Hill. There you are.
Yes, that's me. Reluctantly so, but it's me.
Well, you were everywhere on that day, and those 5 days, you were everywhere involved in that. Mike was saying, I was talking to Mike about it earlier. Just like every one of the most, if you ask someone, what do you know about the Kennedy assassination? There are a lot of images that come to your mind. There's a Bruder film. You're the guy who's running up on the back of the car. The President Johnson being sworn in. You're just right off camera there, witnessing that. And just every step along the way, you are there. Right? And Mike called you Zelig, which is the Woody Allen film, and it's kind of like Forrest Gump, just being everywhere where everything important is happening.
But also, I think what is so interesting about this book is because Clint was right there in and amongst everything, you get a sense of what was all going on behind the scenes and what was happening in the chaos and the questions, along with all the emotion. They couldn't stop to grieve and process this. He had to keep doing his job. He had to protect Mrs. Kennedy. They didn't know who was behind this. So yes, the president is dead. Now they have to get President Johnson back to Washington. Is somebody going to shoot down the plane at the time? So I think that's what's really fascinating, is being right there in the middle of it. And then going through Mrs. Kennedy having to, pick out where her husband's going to be buried. And, there were different questions about that. The family, I think, wanted him to be buried in Massachusetts.
Yeah.
And so, there were all these decisions that had to be made in this horrible, moment when the unthinkable had just happened. And yet you have to continue on and do your job. And she had to plan a funeral. And, Clint's there telling her, Mrs. Kennedy, I don't think it's a good idea for you to walk through the streets of Washington, D.C. 3 days after there's been an assassination. I mean, it was a security nightmare. So all of those things that go on just bring it to life for people to help them understand really how immensely tragic this was.
And at the same time she was doing all this stuff, she held, after the funeral, she held a reception for all those heads of state that came there. And she told me earlier that day that please remind me, meaning her, that John's third birthday is today, November 25th. And so they arranged for a little party after this reception for all these heads of state. There was a little party with just cousins and the various military assistants to the president, the Air Force, Navy, Army came there, and they gave John little gifts like a helicopter and a boat, and, not a real one, just a toy. But she remembered it, and she managed to do that. And then later that night, she called me, and we took her over to the cemetery, and she had a private moment there with her husband's body.
When did you sleep?
Oh, not much, I can tell you that. From the time we left the White House around 10:30 on the 21st, first sleep I had was I got to bed that night, but not until about 1 in the morning, and got up at 6. Then all day the 22nd, all through past midnight, got to the White House at 4:30, back in my office by 6, went home 8, put it on. I don't know, I didn't get any sleep the 22nd. Maybe 1 hour between 12 and 1 a.m.
In the book, you said you'd been awake for 42 hours before
Well, that
you
doesn't
finally
surprise
got
me
to
at all.
sleep. Yeah.
That
Yeah.
doesn't surprise me. The fact.
You know,
then the
nobody ever
next
talks
day-
about this, but I mean, I think it's super interesting. Like I thought the same thing when I saw. I think it was the Missiles of October. Remember, it was William Devane, I think, played Kennedy in that. Like, there was a required viewing, when I was in school, and I think that's the first time I remember thinking, when and how do you sleep? You're the leader of the free world, and it looks like we're entering into the end of the world, right? The potential nuclear Armageddon. You have to sleep because you can't function, but how do you in the midst of a situation like that? And like, do you dream, or do you simply pass out, and then just wake up screaming and getting back at it? Can't even imagine.
You know, everybody tries to accommodate the president, whoever it may be, insofar as getting rest is concerned. But there are a lot of things that happen in the middle of the night which they have to be awakened and discussed with. So it really takes a toll. If you look at a person who takes the oath of office on the 20th of January, look at him 6 months later and then 6 months again, you're going to see a big difference in how they appear, because it really wears a person down. It is a very difficult job, and it's not for somebody who can't take stress, because it is stressful.
At your party, did you guys talk about this sort of stuff, or was it football games, your favorite movies, your last great meal?
Yeah,
What did
usually
you guys
was-
reminisce about?
Well, the things that happened along the way, that, people make mistakes, agents included, and those were the things we laugh about after the fact, when it didn't cause any harm, and we could laugh about it. And we all have those occasions that we know someone who did something that was really stupid, and we laugh about it. We try to learn from it. But,
I'd like to hear more about that. I don't want you to throw anybody under the bus, but tell me a stupid story. Something.
well,
Tell me.
gee.
Give me a cautionary tale, Clint. Something I can apply to my own, my own ridiculous life.
Well, I'm gonna have to think now. I have to clean it up.
No, you don't.
Oh yeah, I do. But, I mean, some things that happened. I had the privilege of serving 5 presidents, 3 Republicans and 2 Democrats: Eisenhower, Kennedy, Johnson, Nixon, and Ford. And they all had different habits and different lifestyles. I mean, Eisenhower was older, he was in his 70s at the end, and
That sounds young now.
well, it does now. But
His 70s. Wow. Yeah.
and he was a general. In fact, Mrs. Eisenhower never called him president; she called him general, the general. So you wanted to talk to her, you're talking about the general.
Do you see how he's diverting Mike
I do. Yep.
away from telling stories
Well, Mrs.
about
I-
the Secret Service agents?
Well, even Mrs. Eisenhower, we had jokes. She loved to go shopping, and she usually preferred to go to that French store, J.C. Penney. That's what. I mean, it was crazy times, but
Tell him the story about, wasn't there an agent that was overseas and he ended up coming back on the Queen Mary or something like that.
Brooks. Yeah, we had an agent, he's from New York. And he was always getting himself in trouble. And he was overseas on an assignment. In fact, I think he was assigned to the Paris office for a while. And he had to return back to Washington, D.C. So they sent him a message saying, "You're required to return to Washington at the most earliest convenience and conveyance possible." He knew that I think it was the Queen Mary, was leaving one of the ports there in France, going to New York, and that was the earliest conveyance, going
Earliest
directly
departure.
and so he went back to New York, and it took him, 2 weeks to get there, whatever it was. But that was just the typical type of guy that he was, and he got away with it.
He got a cruise on the Queen Mary because he followed orders to the letter.
He followed orders, leave on the earliest conveyance possible.
I want to shift gears real quick, too, from the movie you didn't know about, In the Line of Fire, to one that I'm pretty sure you do, which is like the documentary of your whole life, which I was honored to appear in.
Well, and the great thing is, part of the surprise was I invited the film crew to come and film this surprise reunion of the agents.
So that becomes part of the
So
documentary.
that will be part
Oh,
of the
great.
documentary, because they had gone around the country and filmed some of these guys, Ron Pontius and Jerry Blaine, who are Clint's longest friends, oldest friends in the Secret Service, and went through so much of this with him. So they had gone and interviewed them separately. And so now in the film, you'll get to see them together at this surprise that he truly did not know about. I mean, I was worried that, I wasn't worried that, he was going to have a heart attack or something. I was more worried that he was going to be so mad at me, but he wasn't. That was good. He was very happy in the end.
I had to be happy. I mean, it was a wonderful event. I couldn't have dreamt it up. I mean, it was fantastic.
And
Most people would have canceled a trip to Italy for it, probably.
look, I'm a neighbor, all right? I've got all the access I need. Last thought, Clint. I wonder if you would say something to people today who feel like they're living in a truly unprecedented time. People who look at the situation in the Mideast and maybe the divisions in our country and all of the uncertainty that comes from living in a time when the experts don't see eye to eye on any given topic. As a guy who lived through 5 days of maybe the greatest level of uncertainty in the 20th century, what, if any, words of advice or wisdom do you have for people who are just freaking out today by the headlines that we see?
Well, I find it very difficult myself to continue to watch news stories recently. It's very hard. But for the common American people, we have to have patience. Eventually, I think it will work its way out. I think that eventually we'll get back to normal, where people will be able to talk to each other, whether they're a Democrat talking to a Republican or whatever. I know I have friends. I had a friend who was a lawyer in Washington, and he said he had clients when they were Democrat and Republican, but he couldn't have them in the appointments with them in his office close together, because if they met, they immediately got into an argument. So, I mean, it just gotten stupid. So all I can say is I hope and pray for better days ahead. And I really honestly think that we'll get there. We've been through some really trying times in the past. In 1968, the riot in Chicago at the Democratic National Convention was something that it was hard to believe we could get over that, but we did. And we've gotten over a lot of things, and so just have faith and make people be honest again. I wish that they would be.
Be kind.
Yes, be kind, be thoughtful, be considerate. You know, take care of each other. I don't know what else I could tell you. Just
I mean, you're right there with the Boy Scouts, Clint. Trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient,
there's
cheerful.
nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with the Boy Scouts.
Folks, you're going to love the book. You were a Boy Scout?
I was a Boy Scout. I
tell
didn't
me
get the
that.
Eagle, but I got the next step up.
So you quit.
You were an
quit the
Eagle
Boy
Scout,
Scouts.
right, Mike? Mike, you were an Eagle Scout.
I am an Eagle Scout.
You are an Eagle Scout, yes.
There's no
Once an
such thing.
Eagle,
It's like the
always an
Marines. No
Mike
past
Rowe
tense.
and Gerald Ford, Eagle Scouts.
You know what, Clint? Gerald
got a letter.
Ford wrote me a letter. He wrote me a letter when I got my Eagle Award in 1977, I guess. And really, I didn't think much about it until years later when Dirty Jobs turned into a thing, and people knew that I had been in Scouts. I started getting requests to write a letter myself, a congratulatory letter to anybody who got
Sure.
that award. And Chuck was there when this thing got out of hand. I wound up sending out over 50,000 in 10
Oh my
years.
goodness.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good
But-
thing you did. That's congratulations. I appreciate knowing that.
Thank you for what you do, Mike, and Chuck, too.
Yes, both of you. Thank you very much.
Chuck, unfortunately, is going to be let go this week, but
You
he
say
had a
that.
great run. He had a great run, and he's got literally dozens of fans who are going to miss him, or at least pretend to. But thank you for saying that, Lisa. It means a
I
lot
appreciate
to him.
it as well. Yes, thank you.
You could push the mute button, Chuck. Shut him off.
If only it were that simple, Clint.
I'm going to work on that.
If only we all had a device that we could point at anybody and mute them. Wow. Get me one of those. All right,
I just wanna
guys.
say
Thank you
again,
for your
sorry.
patience.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yep.
thank
Go
you,
ahead, Chuck.
and thank
Say
you
whatever
so
you're gonna
much.
Say.
I just want to say I want to thank you again for writing this book. It's so great. It's
Well,
just
thank
such
you.
a great book. I loved it, and
Thank you.
it was wonderful. If you like what you heard,
And even if you don't,
won't you please,
pretty please subscribe. Well, I hate to beg and I hate to plead, but please, pretty freaking please, please subscribe.